They are devastating this country. They are undermining children and veterans and seniors with the kind of cuts that they're proposing, and they're literally almost eliminating education in this country.
Literally. They're literally doing it. Literally, and then literally almost. But she had to throw in that word, didn't she? Gosh, I can't take it anymore. Joining me now, the great Liz Wheeler of The Liz Wheeler Show and world-famous author a couple times over in the new book, Hide Your Children, which you should be doing from these freaks. Hey, Liz, are they literally taking away education? Is that what they're doing, Liz?
I wish that we were literally taking over our education system and literally getting rid of it, because it's one of the only ways that we can get rid of this indoctrination. Unless, of course, Republicans were smart enough to use the education system the way it was intended, which was as an indoctrination center, but indoctrination of Christian and American values. If only Republicans were smart enough to do that.
Liz, why aren't they smart enough to do that? Because they're not. They're useless, and I hate them. Why?
Yes, I largely concur. Politicians are useless. We should dislike them all and be critical of every one of them in both parties. The reason why is because the Republican Party lost sight of what we believe. And what I mean by that is our constitutional heritage is a heritage to use our government to properly order society. We are supposed to acknowledge right and wrong as defined by Judeo-Christian morals. And yet, for the past 50 years, as these Marxists have been subverting and infiltrating our institutions, the Republicans have done little to nothing to fight back. I mean, quite obviously, that's why we're in this cultural insanity that we're in, because Republicans forget that the definition of liberty, and you and I, Jesse, I think we'd like to think that we live in a free country, although it's at risk. But Republicans in the Republican Party define liberty as the ultimate end for a country, whereas the true definition of liberty is the means to something greater. So if you define liberty as the ultimate end to something, then you would have to admit that drag queen story hour, where grown men are dressed up as sexualized versions of women gyrating in front of children, that would have to have some inherent morality to it because they simply had the freedom to do it. And yet you and I know that that's not only grotesque, it's downright evil, which means that the actual definition of liberty must be that liberty is a means to something greater. And Republicans were so good at pointing out what's bad, what's wrong. We've forgotten to define what's right and order our political agenda towards making our society achieve that.
Liz, I don't think we want to define what's right. From what I see, we don't have the balls to define what's right, with all due respect. I think that it's a I don't want to get yelled at thing. It's easy to criticize, right? But they don't want to say what's right. They don't want to say this is what this should look like. This is what a secure border should look like. This is what a family should look like. They don't want to, because then once you've pointed that out, then you just open yourself up for more criticism. And Lord knows Republicans hate that.
Well, of course, right. I mean, the second half of my book is a critique of the Republican Party. Like, we expect evil from Democrats, right? But we would hope that the Republican Party, which is supposed to serve as a bulwark against these evil people doing evil things, would be somewhat effective. They're not, because they'd rather embrace this idea of libertarianism because it gives them moral license to do whatever it is they want to do. But I mean, I was a libertarian when I was younger too. I think a lot of us were. I don't say this with animosity per se, but libertarianism simply doesn't work. I mean, think about the laws in our nation. We have laws right now that are purely for moral purposes. For example, children aren't allowed to walk on the floor of a casino. Why? Because it's physically harmful for them? No, because we all agree that it is a moral hazard. Republicans have forgotten that there is a just use of government to actually play offense and push our values, not force people to practice religion if they don't want to, but to order our society towards flourishing. Jesse, there's no such thing as neutrality. Republicans have fallen for this idea that if we remove morality from our legislative efforts and from our culture, that it'll just be this even playing field. But that's not the case. If we do not define the values that shape our culture, the left will, and that's exactly what's happening.
You know what the difference? Well, one of the differences between men and women, Liz, I look behind you and I see all these nice books. Like, you wrote this book and there's all these books and it's all set up in this really nice decorative way. That's where your book is. My book is here too. And it's there's a stack of about 50 pieces of paper here. And then there's one copy of my book. It's on the desk over here, Liz. Yours is wallpapering behind you, and this is where mine is. That's because Aubrey won't come into the studio anymore. She says it smells.
Well, I mean, yes, you could have a little more decorative touch in your studio. Is it too much, Jesse, with all these books? Is it too much? Because earlier in the day, I actually had one of my books on the Liz Wheeler Show sign, but it kept falling and crashing in the middle of when we were trying to film. So I had to take it down. But the goal was to absolutely plaster the place with them.
You did it. You did it. All right, Liz, one thing I do want to talk to you about, speaking of your book, is it's crazy how much of our own destruction we're funding. Like, I talk about this all the time on my show. I know you do too, about how we pay this tax money. We pay these tax dollars. And so much of our tax money now goes to government or non-government institutions and organizations that are Marxist institutions and organizations. The Department of Education takes our tax money, and what do they do with it, Liz?
They indoctrinate our children. But the thing is, I don't think indoctrination is bad. I think it's a morally neutral concept. I think it's what's being indoctrinated into our children that determines it. This is what I challenge conservatives to do in my book. I really think that the only solution to this cultural insanity that we're experiencing is if we start playing offense, if we abandon this idea that liberty is license, and we have to use the just authority of government to push forward, to ban critical race theory, ban transgender ideology, educate children on the horrors of communism. We have to acknowledge the Judeo-Christian morals and truth, the objective reality that underpins our society. So the first half of my book I'm proud of. I name the names of the organizations and the people that are behind the attack on America's kids. But the second half of my book, I'm even prouder of. I think I'm going to get more pushback on the second half because it's going to rattle some conservatives who like to think conservatism is libertarianism. But I'm here to tell you that it is not.
How about that? Hide your children. Speaking of hide your children, Liz, I'm glad Miguel Cardona got up, said this yesterday on camera. Not yesterday, 2 days ago, whatever. Who cares what day it was? This is what he said. Here it was.
I respect differences of opinions. I don't have too much respect for people that are misbehaving in public and then acting as if they know what's right for kids.
Liz, I love when these people speak like this about these stupid parents and how these dumb parents don't know what they want for kids. I love how honest they are now.
Yeah, he respects everyone's opinions. As long as you agree with him, as long as you don't dissent from what he wants to do, then he respects your opinion. God forbid a parent have an opinion about their child's education. Listen, these people, one of the things that I mentioned in my book is we're so used to ignoring the fake news and the false narratives and the lies that come from Democrats and their mouthpieces in the mainstream media that we actually forget sometimes to listen to what they say, because Democrats actually do tell us what they believe. They do tell us what their goal is, and they tell us how they're going to strategically accomplish that goal. And one of the main things they're doing right now is trying to undermine parental rights at every turn, whether it's mentally or like mental health care, whether it's the transgender ideology. You might lose custody of a child in California if you don't affirm their gender identity, whether it's wanting to ban homeschooling, whatever it is, whether it's declining a vaccine. They want to undermine parental rights because ultimately, if they are to achieve their goal, which is to take down the United States, destroy a free country, impose Marxism, they have to destroy the nuclear family, and they have to do it by focusing on children.
Her book is Hide Your Children. You see it displayed all over, except it's not on her sign. Liz Wheeler, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate it.